Okay. How old were you when about the Depression time?
I must have been around 7. The stock market crashed in 29. I was born in 22, so I'd be 7 years old.
Okay. And what you remember most about your childhood?
Well, there's a lot of things to remember. I remember that our family was very poor. We lived in very poor neighborhoods next to the railroad tracks, coal yard trestles, and the city dump. Our pleasures as a child was games like kick the can, sandlot, baseball. As far as having any other things that the children have today, the toys and bicycles and stuff, why, this didn't happen with us. Our parents couldn't afford it. Not until later on. I remember that as soon as we were able to have freedom enough to work, we had to pick up our change wherever we could. When I was a child, I picked up rags and pieces of copper and steel and took them to the junkyards. Rags paid a penny a pound. If you took 20 pounds of rags in a big burlap bag to the junkyard, you'd get a dime. Our monetary things were few, material things. All I can know that I was fortunate in many ways that we had a home full of love and warmth. And perhaps this comes with poverty, I don't know. But we certainly had it. Cereals such as our children have today weren't there. I mean, we just couldn't afford that kind of thing. It was oatmeal and cream of wheat and margarine that you had to mix for butter for our toast. I walked 1.5 miles up the railroad tracks with 25 cents to buy 5 loads of day-old bread, and that's what we had. And you stood in line to get that as your bakery trucks pulled in and unloaded with the day-old bread that they had picked up that day. And then what they didn't sell, they burned. They didn't give it away, they burned it. I can remember standing in line waiting to shovel snow on the railroad tracks for 20 cents an hour, which was big wages then. And maybe you were lucky to be picked to do that when it was 10 below zero. And maybe you weren't lucky. You didn't get that job. And when it snowed, we took our shovels and went around house to house in the affluent neighborhoods. Asked them if they wanted us to shovel their walk or their driveways. And we'd shovel a driveway and a big walk, part of a backyard, for 25 cents. Mm-hmm. Then there were paper routes. I used to buy 20 papers from this little old lady that had a newsstand on the corner, the busy corner in Utica, and they cost me 2 cents a piece. I sold the papers for 3 cents a piece. That was the going rate for a newspaper in those days. And I built up customers in the 5 and dime stores, the clerks in Cresby's department store, and the Boston store, the big department stores. And then what extra papers I had, I stood on the corner. And I hollered out, "Paper? Paper, mister? Read all about it. Latest edition."
So you lived in the city then?
Yeah, and all the money that I made, I brought home to my mother. I worked in grocery stores for $3 a week after school. That was a better job than selling newspapers, because at least you weren't cold, or you didn't get soaking wet in the rain. Prior to that, in between and any extra time, I had to go down into the alleys in the behind the big department stores and pick up crates and break them up into little pieces and bring them home for kindling, for our firewood for the winter. We did this all summer. Plus we take our carts and go along the railroad tracks and pick up pieces of coal that fell off the boxcars as they rattled by and brought them home for the coal bin. We couldn't afford gas or electricity for cooking. That was too expensive, so my mother cooked over a hot stove and a hot fire all summer long. My mother took in ironings. She had ironings from doctors and lawyers. She ironed her white shirts. She scrubbed houses, did housework to help the family supplement the income. My dad never made more than $20 a week that I can remember, right up until the time the Depression was over. And a lot of his jobs were $3 and $4 a week, and $8 and $9. And yet he was too proud to go on relief. Most of the families in our neighborhood were on relief, and they lived better than we did because my dad was too proud to accept charity.
So what you do for fun then?
Fun. I hung around with the gangs on the corner. On Saturday, I went to the movies. Sometimes I'd have 7 or 8 cents, and it was 10 cents to get in. And I'd stand out in front of the movies as these guys would come in with their girls to go to the movies, and I'd ask them if they had a penny. And I'd get another penny. If I had 7 cents, that gave me 8. So I'd have to panhandle another 2 cents in order to get a dime to get in the show. Now, there were some times I didn't get anything, and I had to skip in. When they'd come out for intermission to have a smoke, I'd mingle with the crowd and smoke with them. And then when they all started to walk in, I'd walk in with the crowd. I'd get in the movies for nothing.
Okay. How about when you started, you started with a newspaper. What other jobs did you have, like, when you were younger?
Well, when I quit school when I was 16.
When was that?
I quit because, for one thing, I wanted to get out and work and help my family. My first job was in a bowling alley from 10 o'clock at night until 4 in the morning. I got 3 cents a game for setting up the pins. The only way you could make anything is to juggle alleys. That means set up 2 alleys at once by jumping over the barricade and setting that one and then jumping back over to the other, which you work pretty hard. But I averaged $10 and $11 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took a job at a hotel, and I worked nights there as a bellhop and elevator operator. I got $3 a week, but I got one good big meal each night, which was really good. So then I signed up for the CCCs. I was too young, but I went to the Bureau of Vital Statistics and got a birth certificate from them, which was a card with a city seal on it. I erased the date of birth from 1922. I erased one of the 2s and put a 1 there. It made me 17, which it was when they allowed you to go into the CCs, even though your books say 18, it was 17. Mm-hmm. I got I got $30 a month, $1 a day. And $25 of it went home to my mother. We never saw that. In fact, my mother helped make the payments on the house. Payments on the house we were living in at that time were $15 a month. The house cost us $1,500. Was all that house. Of course, you could see daylight from standing in the kitchen looking through the walls. You could see daylight outside. It was in such bad shape, but it was ours. It was our first home that we owned. Prior to that, we always rented. So I stayed in the CCs for 9 months.
So what kind of work did you do?
We built reservoirs. I planted thousands of trees. fought forest fires, built roads, worked in national parks, building fireplaces and so on. It was wonderful work. It was outdoors. And being outdoors, you developed one terrific appetite. And they fed us wonderful. I never heard of corn fritters for breakfast and maple syrup, but that's what I had. Prior to that, it was the oatmeal and the cream of wheat, and sometimes 3 times a day. And then you could eat all you wanted. They packed you a good lunch with fruit and sandwiches, and the supper were roast beef, all the good things, and all you could eat. I was usually the first one in for supper and the last one to leave. I went from about 135 pounds to 190, and I grew 2 inches. But the most wonderful thing about it, when I got out of the CCCs, all the friends that I grew up with were in reform school.
Why?
Stripping cars, breaking and entering. They had nothing to do, no jobs, nothing. And they got in trouble. The CCs was a wonderful setup for that, because it took a lot of the boys off the streets where they would have got in trouble. And after that, I got a job with the Savage Arms. And that was in 1939.
Why'd you work there, though?
Because it was a good job. I got there wasn't any work. Before that, I worked nights at a hotel as a busboy, and these are jobs when you were on call. They'd call you if they had a party going on, and you assisted the waitresses in carrying the heavy trays up and setting up the tables and bringing the food up. And I got $1.75 a night for each party, plus whatever tips the waitress that I worked for or was helping wanted to share with me. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'd go home with $2.50 for that evening's work, plus a good meal. Mm-hmm. So then through our church, our choir master, when I sang in the choir, he was manager for the Savage Arms Corporation, who made machine guns. And they had a history of making guns. They made sporting guns during peacetime. During World War I, they made the Lewis machine gun. And of course, when the war broke out here, they made the Thompson submachine gun, the 50 caliber machine gun, and the 30 caliber machine gun. I first went to work there. They were making submachine guns, but it was for foreign powers, probably England and so on, because we weren't in war at the time. And I got a job as a maintenance man and yard man, bull work. I mean, you unloaded boxcars, you shoveled snow, you worked on the roof, repairing the roof, and cleaning out machinery and moving machinery and so on. I got 45 cents an hour. That's $18.90 a week. And $10 of it I gave my mother for board. And I kept the other $8.90, which at that time you could buy a pair of pants for $2. Mm-hmm. So I was dressed pretty good. In fact, most of the girls in the neighborhood, their mothers thought I was a real good catch, and they ought to try to marry me because I was making big money. Mm-hmm. Anybody that worked for the Savage Arms?
How old were you?
I was, let's see, I was 18 when I went to work at the Savage. I worked there 4.5 years. Of course, when we entered the war after the Japanese attack, then we had big contracts for machine guns, and I transferred from my department as a laborer to a finished firearm, which was piecework. And I made good money then. I worked 6 days a week, 10.5 hours a day for $100 to $150 a week, which isn't a lot of money when you figure the amount of hours that you had to do to make that. our base pay was $1.60 an hour, but anything over that you earned by piecework, they prorated it so that you might be ended up by making $5 an hour or $6 an hour, which was supposed to be big money. So I worked there until September of 43 when I enlisted in the Navy.
So what do you remember about Pearl Harbor as far as,
I remember it was a terrible shock. I can remember anger. I can remember wanting to go over and kill all the Japs by myself, which we know is the wrong way to look at it, but at that time there was such a surge of patriotism throughout the whole country. There was people lined up at all the recruiting offices waiting to enlist. Nobody was running to Canada and burning their draft cards. Everybody was wanting to go and fight for their country. In fact, I went in because I felt guilty because my friends are all going.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally enlisted, and my boss begged me to stay because I was a good man on my job, and he said he'd give me all the deferments I wanted, but I couldn't. I had to go, so I went.
And that was, how old were you then?
I was 21 when I enlisted.
Okay. All right. Now, what do you remember
22,
most about the Depression?
I remember the doing without. I can remember mostly, of course, when you say remember, it's the way things impressed me at that time. I can remember going to school with a sport jacket that my brother had worn out and my mother had patched. And that sport jacket came from a relative in New York that sent us a box of clothes, so it was secondhand when my brother got it. It was third hand when I got it, and it was patched on patches, and I was very proud of it. It was the best piece of clothing that I had owned, that I ever owned. I'm very proud of it. My mother had sewed patches on the elbows, and then she had to take them off and put more patches on because my brother wore the patches out. In fact, I couldn't wait till he outgrew it so I could wear it. And this held true for our pants and everything else. I wore clothes with patches on patches. I wore shoes where my dad had cut car tires up to make soles and nailed on. And then, of course, when my dad got so he was making $27 a week, we could afford to go to Kresge's and buy leather soles, and he'd tap them on our shoes.
Okay.
Those things are the things that stuck with me. My first bicycle was when my dad got his bonus from World War I, and he bought me a bicycle.
So that's when the toys started coming in.
Yeah.